Have you yourself been in an argument or seen other people arguing about what it is that a word means, or one person saying to the other, no, this is not the original meaning of the word, so we shouldn't use it that way? For example, oh, did you know the original meaning of decimate is to reduce to 1/10? Therefore, you cannot say decimate to mean devastate or ruin or destroy. Therefore, that is not a correct use of the word decimate. The question is that a valid argument about the word decimate or similar words? Let me attempt a definition for the phrase etymological fallacy. The etymological fallacy is a belief that the original or historical meaning of a word is its true or correct meaning, regardless of how people use it nowadays. For example, some might say the word nice originally meant foolish in English, so using it to mean pleasant is wrong. Is that actually the case? Language is like a living organism. Languages are born and languages die. Or it could be that parts of a particular language die and there will be new things, new words, for example, being born in a language. There are words that we use today that we didn't use 100 years ago in any given language. Those words have been born. And there were words that were used 200 years ago that are not being used anymore. Those words are dead. And a lot of other words continue to exist from hundreds of years ago, but their meanings have undergone partial or total change. I just gave you an example of a word in English, which is the word nice, how its meaning has changed through history. Language is constantly evolving. It's shaped by its speakers and by cultural changes. Sticking to a word's original meaning ignores the natural evolution of language, and it fails to account for language change. On this channel, we have done a bunch of videos about language change and variation, which I strongly recommend you go back to and watch. Language change is actually a technical term, and it has a specific meaning, and so is language variation. Let me give you some more examples to clarify this situation of etymological fallacy. Did you know the word girl in English originally meant a young person of any gender? So it could be even boy or girl in today's usage. Nowadays, however, it is used specifically to refer to female young humans. Another example is the word meat. The word meat originally meant food. It wasn't just animal flesh. However, throughout the evolution of the English language, the meaning of the word meat, as well as the meaning of the word girl, have evolved. Such shifts in meaning illustrate how words adapt to societal needs, reflecting semantic change and change in culture and perspective. If you're interested in such topics, you can look into sociolinguistics, which looks at language change, language variation, and it discusses such semantic changes through history. You can also indeed look into historical linguistics or diachronic linguistics. I also strongly recommend you go back and watch our video on what is etymology. Anyway, words develop new meanings as people use them in varied contexts, from everyday conversation to popular media. If you try to hold on to the original meaning of a word, it's kind of impractical, and it may actually stifle communication. You might ask, if that is the case, why is it that so many people fall into the trap of the etymological fallacy? You could provide different explanations to this. One reason could be that many people see language as a set of rules rather than a dynamic, evolving system. Also, people feel a sense of purity about language. They want to protect it. They want to protect the true meaning of words. This is the perspective behind what we call prescriptive linguistics, or the prescriptive approach to linguistics or language. The prescriptivist approach to language ignores the natural evolution of language. Modern linguistics has a descriptive approach to language. It's descriptivist. We just try to describe what people mean when they use a word in the context. You might ask me, are you saying etymology is useless? That is not what I'm saying. Etymology is actually very fascinating. It is the story of how words have evolved throughout their existence, semantically or even morphologically. However, we need to be aware that etymology is the historical evolution. Therefore, things may have changed. There's language change. The past meaning of a word does not necessarily dictate how we should use it today. To make this more interesting, I'm going to go back to the word decimate, which comes from Latin. Dec, like decimal, decimare in Latin. It referred to a Roman punishment where 1 in every 10 soldiers was killed. Some claim when we use decimate in English to mean to destroy a large portion of something, someone might say, oh, you actually destroy 1/10. So that is not an accurate use of the word decimate in English. This would be a prescriptivist approach to language, which ignores the evolution of the word decimate in English, which is not necessarily the same as it is in Latin. Therefore, the meaning of the word decimate in English is not the same as the meaning of the word decimare in Latin. In English, decimate means significant destruction. Awful. Awful means full of awe. Therefore, or awe-inspiring, which is a positive thing. Well, when we say awful, it means very bad. You shouldn't use the word awful in that sense. This is another example. The word awful doesn't mean awe-inspiring anymore. I mentioned the word nice, but there is another word that drives a lot of people crazy. The word literally. The way people use the word literally to not mean literally. They actually mean figuratively. I literally died. I personally sometimes get mad too. I say like, oh, then if you mean literally is not literally, then what other word is there that we can use to mean literally? I don't know how to fix that problem. But as a descriptivist linguist, I also understand that when people say literally, I literally died of laughter, it doesn't mean they actually and physically died. Manufacture. The word manufacture has a part, manu, which means hand. Manufacture means done or made by hand. So someone might object, oh, manufacture, if you'd make things using robots, that's not manufacture. I'm sorry, but you are trapped by the etymological fallacy. Last but not least, the word quarantine. Quarant means 40. It means that you kept people in a particular place for medical reasons for 40 days. This dates back to the Black Plague. However, nowadays when we use the word quarantine, we don't necessarily mean 40 days. And I'm glad that we don't. As you remember, during COVID, there were quarantines, but they were like a couple of days. Imagine if they actually literally meant 40 days. Life would be worse than it was. So you can quarantine a person for 1 day. You don't have to do for 40 days. These are examples of etymological fallacy, and I'm sure there are many more interesting examples that you could mention in the comments. In summary, we need to know that etymology is a very enriching and fascinating part of linguistics. It is a very exciting approach to the understanding of language. However, we should be very careful not to be trapped by etymological fallacy. It's important to know that words change like living organisms. Language itself is like a living organism. It undergoes evolution. Words die and new words are born. And many words change, their meanings change partially or totally, or they may adopt additional new meanings. Therefore, looking at the original meaning of a word may be very interesting and enlightening. It can be historically very informative, but it doesn't determine what a word means today. In order to know what a word means, we need to actually collect data on how people use the language in a context. So based on realistic linguistic data, we can determine the meaning of a word.